Well, it looks like PFL's back. Regular season number 4. And with PFL, man, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, they got great intentions. Don't get me wrong. They start off every season the same. This is our lightweight tournament, our welterweight tournament, our middleweight tournament, so on and so forth. And then literally by like the end of the first round, it's like, oh, this guy's hurt, can't continue. This guy dropped out. This guy got pulled out for various reasons. Half of it ends up being short notice replacements. Half of these short notice replacements have no points in the tournament. There's no point in them fighting in the tournament. Every episode was supposed to be like, one show would be their middleweights and their heavyweights, and their next show would be their bantamweights and their lightweights, like mixing it up. But now it's like they'll just throw a fight on whatever card. Doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't really care about the consistency of things. It's tough putting on one-night tournaments. Sorry, not one-night tournaments. Tournaments in general. Just so much can happen with injuries and stuff. But in their case, I mean, like their entire platform is on the basis of these tournaments. So as a result, we got returning guys that are kind of were meant to advance through the tournament anyways. And in some instances, they're taking on short notice replacements who, again, were not part of the original tournament to begin with. They have nothing to lose, but one's got to imagine they're not quite as prepared as they should be. So kicking things off, we've got a non-tournament affair. We've got Clarissa Shields taking on Brittany Elkin. This is a very interesting fight. Don't get me wrong. It's probably one of the more intriguing bouts on the card. For the simple matter of the fact that you got Clarissa Shields, who's the greatest female boxer of her weight class, probably, pound for pound in a very long time. I met her up in New York at the Boxing Hall of Fame, probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. And, she's as advertised, very smart, very well-spoken, very hardworking, and a fantastic athlete. Someone that's captured 2 Olympic gold medals and then proceeds to go on to, an undefeated pro boxing career, multiple division world champion. There's literally no point in her taking an MMA fight. It just makes no sense. You've got such a legacy in boxing, such a reputation in boxing. And it's not one of these fighters, like you do see it. Heather Hardy's a good example. She fought for Bellator, where these pro boxers, they've got an excellent record in pro boxing. They can't get fights. There's no great money to be made. There's no great marketing opportunities. And so they'll take an MMA fight. But in her case, it's like she is making money. She is getting paid. She fought her last pro boxing match just 3 months ago. So the whole narrative is she's been at Greg Jackson's for the last 7 months right now. But regardless, that's an excellent step, an excellent thing to do. But in the course of those 7 months of her training, she's taken a pro boxing match. So how much of that training consists of purely grappling? Because quite honestly, with her skill set already, her boxing fundamentals, what does she need to learn? Does she need to learn jiu-jitsu? Sure. But did she really need to learn jiu-jitsu? Or does she need to learn to just stuff the takedown? Takedown defense, takedown defense, takedown defense. Grinding with wrestlers every single day, day in, day out. If she can stuff the takedowns, you don't need to know jiu-jitsu. It's not going to come into play. Stuff the takedown, keep the fight standing, and at that point, she's going to have her way over a large majority of these girls. We just don't know how much progression she's made in the 7 months. So we know what PFL's trying to do here. They've paid a lot of money. They signed Clarissa Shields. She's a great signing. She has the potential to have, potential star power to her if she can make this transition. But I really don't think they're looking to expose her right off the hop. So as far as a matchmaking standpoint, and as far as a what's best for PFL standpoint, it would be Clarissa Shields winning. You're not going to give her the toughest opponent going. And so she draws Brittany Elkin. Rightfully so, she opens up as like a minus 600 favorite because the narrative's clearly there. They want her to win. They're not matching her in too tough. And as far as a debut goes, you're taking on a 3-6 opponent who hasn't fought in a couple of years. It's a good look. That's on the surface. Now it gets dropped immediately from 6-1 to minus 450. Betting public's on Brittany Elkin for the simple fact that she is a grappler, right? So we know that it's a style clash, but how are you going to beat Clarissa Shields? Do you want to stand in front of her? No, probably not. Take her down, and then you can expose her. I mean, that's got to be her weakest point. And Elkin is someone who's a BJJ brown belt. She's competed at a number of high-profile grappling tournaments. Not how high profile like ADCCs, but she has mixed it up with a good number of BJJ black belts and has generally come up on the losing end against that upper echelon in the jiu-jitsu world. But no doubt she's competing in the upper echelon. That's something. Ironically enough, she's 3-6. All 3 of her wins, no submission victories. Of the 6 losses, been submitted 3 times. So, billed as a grappler, but like how good is the grappling? Certainly better than Clarissa Shields. But it comes down to the wrestling. It really does. I don't think Brittany Elkin's takedown offense is really all that good. So does she have a grappling advantage? Yes. And if she was to end up on top, it would be a problem. But Clarissa Shields got the money behind her. She's got the marketing machine behind her. She's got Jackson Winkeljohn behind her. She spent basically the last 7 months exclusively with Holly Holm, who competes at 145 pounds, an excellent partner. And who better to teach you every element of the game? She herself is a professional boxer who made the transition by learning that kickboxing game and then eventually adding the wrinkles of the ground game, and hard work ethic and athleticism has allowed her to advance to a world-class level. Claressa Shields is the same thing. She's a world-class athlete. She's a go-getter. She's a winner. You don't just become a two-time Olympic gold medalist by sitting around. You don't just become an undefeated pro boxer or multiple division world champion by sitting around. Like, yes, it's going to be a little bit slow coming over to MMA, but I mean, she already got in tons of sparring rounds with Cyborg a couple of years back before she ever really and she lit Cyborg up in the gym and was very courteous in saying, Cyborg would be a good boxer, but she's got a long way to go though. Now it's roles reverse. It's like, you might be an okay MMA fighter, but you got a long way to go. And this is a good way of setting her up. So line drops again from 450 to like minus 270. And whereas I did not have an interest in betting this fight at any point, at 270, it almost seems like I'd be willing to put out a flyer on Claressa Shields. I think that she probably stops Brittany Elkins within the first 2 rounds standing. Elkins does tend to take a lot of damage when she is in these stand-up positions. And as far as her ground game goes, I can't trust her enough to go out there and get the takedown. Even if she get the takedown, her jiu-jitsu needs to be slick enough that she gets a quick submission. Because if she gets a takedown and ends up with like 2 minutes of top control and the round ends and that second round starts back standing, Elkin's gas tank's going to give on her. Like, I don't think that she's going to be able to go deep into these rounds, whereas Claressa Shields is used to boxing, 12 2-minute rounds. So ultimately 24 minutes, right? But still 24 minutes is a lot more than the 5 or 10 minutes that Elkin generally goes before she starts to fade. So again, at this line, I'm willing to have a feeler for it, but I mean, buyers beware. We've got a girl making her pro debut, essentially a purist pro boxer making her pro debut, and it is still almost 3-1. So, be a little bit hesitant, but I am going to buy into the narrative. From what I've seen, I like what I see, and I think that she's going to pick up the sport a lot quicker than your average Joe, or Joette in this case. So Clay Collard versus Jolton Luterbach. The line's currently sitting at Clay Collard is a minus 220 versus plus 180 on Joelton. Honestly, I think Clay Collard cuts right through him. I think minus 220 is a pretty fair price as well. So again, you guys know me. If you do know me, if you don't, doesn't matter. I'm a huge Clay Collard fan, right? Fan from this guy right from the beginning. People might remember him from fighting Max Holloway in the UFC back in the day, but he had a very good, strong amateur boxing pedigree to begin with. His uncle actually might have been his grandfather. Anyways, family member in his family gives him that name, Cassius Clay, because from a young age, boxing, loves to box, amateur boxing career, eventually comes over to MMA. And again, he's one of these guys that, like Claressa Shields, starts out as a boxer, adds all the wrinkles to his game of an MMA game, adds a little bit of takedown defense, adds some grappling, starts going out there in the regional scene, submits a few opponents, definitely starts to make some progression in his overall game. But at some point he decides, I got to go back to my first love, which is boxing. And my God, Clay Collard, this is where he really earned my respect. I mean, he comes to the UFC fighting Max Holloway. That earns respect as it is. But he got beat up by Max Holloway. Fair enough. The real deal for him. He takes these fights. Tipton Walker, this is his second pro fight, 6-0. He fights the guy to a draw. Quincy Lavelis, 7-0. He fight that guy to a draw too. Deshaun Crooks, 13-1. Gerald Sherrill, 10-1. He took unanimous decision over him. Tashawn Toller, 9-0. Unanimous decision over him. Raymond Gerardo, 5-0. David Kaminsky, 6-0. Quincy Lavallee in a rematch. Like, all he does, and he did lose his last fight to Mandel Sando, right? 10-0. All he does is fight undefeated prospects, man. It's incredible. And especially that Kaminsky fight, my God, he puts David Kaminsky in the hospital, like completely swells up his face, throws easily over 100 punches, just never stops, stays in his face, aggressive. Finally, the referee said, seen enough. I think Kaminsky makes it a decision. One judge gave him a split, total bullshit. You watch it again, it's like Clay Collard's all over this guy. Why he decided to come back to MMA was a bit of a head scratcher for me. He's making waves in the pro boxing world, but ultimately he's not a pro boxer. Sure, he's a pro boxer. He's never going to be a world-class pro boxer. And he's always going to be one of these guys that's tough, that'll give you rounds, takes a little too much damage, but is willing to give one to get one. But this is $1 million tournament. You come out here, you beat 3 guys, you can win $1 million. So he draws Anthony Pettis in the first round. And I'm all over Clay Collard. You could get him at a very handsome plus money price tag. But again, how do you beat Anthony Pettis? Well, we've seen in the past that Anthony Pettis doesn't fight particularly well off his back foot. Yeah, you can say Edson Barbosa had success moving him back. Those guys have success. But can a Clay Collard? Yes, absolutely, because he's aggressive and he lets his hands go. And for the first 2 rounds, he really does bully Anthony Pettis around. I thought he gave an excellent showing of himself. In the third round, Clay Collard's got just unbelievable cardio. Did seem like he was tiring a little bit. Almost got knocked out late in the round. But still seals it up 29-28. How much damage did he take in that fight? Is he good to roll on to the next one? Possibly. But it was a good showing for him. Also, it's a good showing in his MMA return. Hadn't fought MMA, beat Anthony Pettis, former world champion, coming off a long UFC tenure, one of the most recognizable guys, as a giant underdog, and that was his first pro MMA fight, I guess, since almost 2 years. Regardless of that, that's not the thing here. You come back, you shake off some of that ring rust. That's going to be big. Joelton Luterbach, Brazilian fighter. He is full-time out of Germany. I believe he's actually a German fighter. He's real stiff and rigid, man. That's his thing, is that he fights with his hands low and he kind of stands in front of you. He's not all that fast and he's kind of predictable. You can beat him to the punch. He's had a ton of fights. Like, this is a guy that was on The Ultimate Fighter, believe season 3. Yeah, season 3 Brazil. Since then, it's just been like an absolute gamut. I think he's gone like 22-7 in the time since The Ultimate Fighter. Fought for relatively notable organizations, but has fought some notable guys. He fought Cowboy Oliveira. Of course, he lost. He fought Jungle Fights champion, Shooto Brazil champion, Ishmael de Jesus. Of course, he lost that one, got knocked out. He took on a pair of dirty Russians over in ACB, tough guys. He comes up on the short end. When he's fighting in Brazil, when he's fighting in the average mid-level range of guys, he beats them. And he's one of these guys that fights very often. Mid-level range guys, beats them, right? What he signs, he fights in KSW against Dricus du Plessis, who's now currently in the UFC, right? Dricus is a heavy hitter. He's a guy that's going to stand in front of you. If you fight with your hands low and you're going to allow yourself to get hit, you're going to get knocked out against Dricus. That's what happens here. He loses to Dricus, wins a couple fights back in the regional scene, and then he fought on that PFL 1 against Raush Manfio. So the first round, he's getting tagged up big time. It's like, he's a little bit stiff in there, and he's getting hit time and time again by that Manfield left hand. Loses the first round. Second round, he fights his way back into it. He gets a takedown, but it's not a pretty takedown at all. Once he does get the takedown, he does have some top control. He does establish some pressure on him. And then the third round, it's tit for tat. It's pretty close. I would score it slight edge Manfield, because again, he's landing the left hand. He's landing a number of nice shots that are seemingly getting the attention of Joelton. He just can't knock him out. Judges end up giving a split decision for Manfio. The fans at home, they do those little, like, you can vote in, whatever. They had it for Manfio. I had it for Manfio. It was a split decision. It was still a good, competitive, close fight. But Rush Manfio is not going to present what Clay Collard presents. If you want to fight with your hands low like that and get hit, he's going to engage you. He will oblige you in that type of game plan. He does not mind fighting in a phone booth. Does Joelton have the power to knock out Clay Collard? I don't think so. Is Joelton going to take down Clay Collard? That would be his best path to victory. But again, I mean, Clay's worked a lot on that, and he's not a fish out of water on the ground. He's just got to mind his P's and Q's, not get overzealous, and he should box him up. 220, that seems like a very fair price tag. I'm kind of seeing it as like maybe ever so slightly as a trap. Like, do I jump all in on Clay Collard? Do I make him a top ticket guy? I don't think so. I think I'd like him on a second ticket, a third ticket maybe. But it almost looks too good to be true. I did not think that Joelton looked good whatsoever against Manfio, and before that, it was a lot of regional scene stuff. Whereas Clay Collard's coming and win over Anthony Pettis, huge, one of the tournament favorites to win this $1 million. And before that, had like a very successful pro boxing career. It just seems like things are lining up for him. The only one thing that could hinder him possibly is, did he take a lot of damage in that Pettis fight? And this is a quick turnaround. My counter to that is, he's only 28 years old. Like, the body does recover fairly quickly, whereas Joelton Luterbach also took some damage in his last fight. So let's say that's a null point. Nobody has an advantage either side. It just keeps circling back to Clay Collard. So that'll be the pick there. Moving on, we got Bubba Jenkins, Bobby Moffitt. Bubba Jenkins is going to be very successful if he remembers one thing, and I think he's going to. He could potentially win $1 million. And all he needs to do is just stick to his wrestling and nothing other than the wrestling. He shouldn't do anything else. Like, he's a very athletic guy. He's got big power in his hands, but ultimately, it doesn't matter if the fans are going to boo or not, right? Let's say you're fighting in the UFC. Let's say you're fighting in Bellator, right? It's not enough to just wrestle a guy. It's not enough to just get the win, because the second that you lose a fight or you lose 2 consecutive fights, they're getting rid of you. They want fan-friendly style. So really, it hinders your potential ability to make money if you fight these boring fights, because you can go win 3, 4, 5 fights in a row and they're not paying you any more money. They're not putting you on a main card. They're not giving you a prolific matchup. So it causes you to take risks. Taking those risks is where you fuck up. And that's where Bubba Jenkins has had issues in the past. He's had 4 pro losses, 2 of them by submission, 2 of them by knockout. He tends to make mistakes in there. Is he a supreme athlete? Yes. Very fast. Again, has good power. But he leaves his neck out there sometimes. He doesn't wear a punch particularly well. He is not above getting fatigued. He is limited in his own ways. But if he's going to go out there and he's going to beat a guy and he just wants wrestling, well, this is a guy that's wrestled at a very, very high level. This is a guy that's, again, I mean, as far as the wrestling credentials goes, there's very few guys that are going to match up with him. So signing over to PFL, he draws in his first round matchup, Lance Palmer. Now, Lance Palmer is the two-time champion already. He's won $2 million in these PFL tournaments. He's a shoe-in to just walk probably through to another final here. And he comes in effectively as a, well, we got Bubba Jenkins at plus 300 over Lance Palmer. He's not expected to do anything. Here's the kicker, is that these guys wrestled in college, right? Back when Lance Palmer was at Ohio State, they wrestled twice. And Bubba Jenkins beat him both times. Bubba Jenkins is a better wrestler. Is Bubba Jenkins a better fighter than Lance Palmer? I don't think so. I think Palmer's probably got slightly better hands. He's definitely got a better submission game, and durability would go towards Lance Palmer. I could see cardio being towards Lance Palmer. And so where does Bubba Jenkins beat him? The same way he beat him back in college. He's a better wrestler. That's how he beats him. He just gets on the grind, grind, get a hold of this guy, peel him to the ground. If he gets back up, get a hold of this guy, peel him to the ground. If he fights that type of game plan, it's not going to be the most entertaining ride, but who gives a shit? Who gives it? There's no fans to boo, first of all. And even if there was, I got $1 million on the line, Holmes. I don't really care about having some entertaining fight. Bubba Jenkins fight with that kind of game plan, then he's live to carry himself all the way to the finals. Now, Bobby Moffitt steps in as a short notice replacement. He was not supposed to be in the tournament. He's basically stepping in for, Bubba Jenkins beat Lance Palmer and then was supposed to fight. Slow. Anthony Dizzy, he's a French striker, right? So he's supposed to fight on Dizzy tournament already. Lost his first round fight. Doesn't matter. Bobby Moffitt's coming in as a replacement. Now, Bobby Moffitt hasn't fought since he was in the UFC, which is 2 years ago now. He's only 31 years old, so it's not like he's shot by any stretch of the imagination. The only thing is that he himself is also a wrestler, right? He's not as good of a wrestler as Lance Palmer. He's not as good of a wrestler as Bubba Jenkins. He probably has a slight, I'm not even going to say striking advantage over Jenkins. His technical boxing's okay, but Jenkins is going to have the speed on him. So Bobby Moffitt, I don't think he's going to stand in front of Bubba Jenkins and strike with him. He's probably just going to be taken down, and that's his thing. He's going to have to fight off his back. He's going to have to fight off his back. He's going to have to try to find the neck. Him at his best, he loves that Darce choke. He beats Jonathan Jackson with a Darce choke 2018. He gets a contender series versus Jacob Kilburn. He snatches up the Darce choke. He gets Chaz Kelly in the UFC. He also snatches up the Darce choke. If you leave your neck out there, he's going to snag it up. We have seen Bubba Jenkins get caught leaving his neck out there, most namely the first fight with Georgia Karahanian in Bellator, second when he gets knocked out. But is there a tendency to leave your neck out there? Possibly. Could Bobby Moffitt potentially wrap it up and snatch him up with the Darce choke? Again, possibly. The reason why I'm not circling to that as the biggest possibility is Lance Palmer's got a dirty guillotine choke too, man. Like, if you leave your neck out, he's going to snag it up. And Bubba Jenkins did a good job of just keeping himself out of harm's way the whole way. I mean, you can just, leg lace the guy, like ride the guy, go on a hip, just ride him. You don't need to be continuously shooting single legs and double legs, putting your leg in your head into arm's reach. It's just play that safe course. So again, with Bobby Moffitt, when he was in the UFC, the Enrique Barzola fight, his last time out, that's his last pro fight 2 years ago. And prior to this one, he does give up 3 takedowns by Barzola. Barzola also does fight, questionable game plan at best. Bobby Moffitt does match up well in this spot. He's just going to be a step behind in every one area. I do get a bad gut feeling that like Bubba Jenkins is coming off a huge win, but we know who Bubba Jenkins is, and he's an apple pie shitter. He's the kind of guy that has all the potential in the world, has all the skill in the world, and one time was figured to do a real big splash in the scene, just never quite realized his own potential. Picks up a big win over Lance Palmer, and now beating the tournament favorite makes you the tournament favorite. Confident just yet. But yeah, I would have to say, again, if Bubba is just makes this a wrestling match, doesn't have to be a fight, make it a wrestling match. If he does that, he's going to have success. This is another one I don't have a great feeling about. Brendan Luterbach versus Tyler Diamond. Listen, logic suggests that Brendan Luterbach wins this fight all day. He's a superior fighter. He's on a great winning streak right now, 6 straight wins. And like, what has this guy done wrong? Like, put this into consideration, right? He fought once in the UFC, one single time. They even one fight. He fights Mike Wilkinson at the conclusion of The Ultimate Fighter back in 2012. This is 9 years ago. He fights a one-off in the UFC. Since that one-off in the UFC, he's 15-2. Those two losses are both by split decision. And over Tom Duquesnoy, who made it to the UFC and was supposed to be a super prospect, never quite fanned out, but was supposed to be a super prospect, made to the UFC. And Pat Healy, who's a gangster, who's like the definition of grind, who again is a UFC veteran, Strikeforce veteran in pretty much every major promotion. The two losses, both split decision. Those are the only two losses he suffered in the last 9 years, and he's 15-2 overall. So yeah, he's on a great run right now. As far as the guys he's beating, and not bad as well. You know, he went to ACA or ACB, sorry, where he's fighting top flight guys and beating them. Beats Bill LJ Contender Series. LJ currently fighting in the UFC, and Luterbach put a good performance on. You know, over 100 significant strikes landed, a couple takedowns mixed in there as well. And then his last thing is that the result over Shaman Morais looks awesome. He knocks him out in the first round, 2 minutes in, but like he kind of looks stiff and rigid in that fight to me. Like I know he's a volume guy, but he doesn't pack, I don't think, the biggest. Again, he does knock out Shaman. It's a short little right hand to the side of the head, and it discombobulates Shaman Morais. He pounces, he gets the finish. That's props. That's all solid stuff. I got this feeling in the back of my head that's like he is still there to get exposed by somebody, hopefully somebody that could wrestle as well as strike a little bit. And that's kind of what Tyler Diamond brings to the table. Now, he's 30 years old, so he's not exactly a young prospect by any stretch of the imagination. He also is one of these Ultimate Fighter guys himself. Beat Delaney Perry before losing to Jay Cuxanello. Also had a one-off in the UFC where he lost to Bryce Mitchell. The Bryce Mitchell fight, though, was good. I mean, he took down Bryce Mitchell 3 times and outstruck him. You know, what was also taken down 3 times, and Bryce Mitchell had the submission attempts, and that's what got Bryce Mitchell a majority decision. But you see what Bryce is doing in the UFC, and he's kind of everybody's darling, making a lot of progression. And the flip side to that is Tyler Diamond lost that fight, and he got released from the UFC. He didn't have a chance to show his best, but he's won all 3 of his fights since that release. Beats John Neal, who's 10-0. Beats him in the first round. He beats Justin Lin, who's a decent regional show guy for sure. And then he wins his first round matchup over Sung Bin Jo. So he's a guy that wrestled collegiately out of North Dakota State University. Got solid wrestling. He's at a Team Alpha Male. He really does embody the Team Alpha Male style. He's got power wrestling, wrestled collegiately, likes to overhand right over the top, is more of a one and done type striker, maybe a 1, maybe a 1-2, but he's aggressive. He's a good athlete. He's one of these guys that's in your face. And I don't think he's going to necessarily outstrike Luterbach for volume. I think he could outstrike Luterbach, like he could land just as good of the punches, but Luterbach will have the volume on him. It's that ability to potentially mix in some takedowns and grind him. He had some decent success in the clinch, and I feel like Luterbach sometimes does get controlled a little bit in the clinch. So I think part of the reason why I'm thinking Tyler Diamond maybe has a bigger chance than he actually does, I guess we'll come Thursday how big of a chance he really does is I do have Clarissa Shields. He's the favorite. I got Clay Collard. He's the favorite. I'm taking Bubba Jenkins. He's the favorite. At some point, you got to recognize that one of these underdogs is going to hit. One of these underdogs is going to, shit in the apple pie or cash a plus money. Take it however you want to approach the situation. And I almost feel like Tyler Diamond, 12-1 record out of a good camp, 30, wrestled collegiately, decent power, decent durability, decent cardio. Could be one of these guys that kind of flips the switch, so to speak. So buyers beware on that one. Maybe it's more of a passage of the parlays, but I want to like Luterbach way more than I do because he's a legitimate fighter and he should be in the UFC himself. But I don't know. I just got like a bad gut feeling. Nathan Schultz versus Alex Martinez. This is another fight that got put together yesterday. So unfair to these fighters that it's like, oh, you're fighting next week? No, you're fighting this week. Oh, you're fighting this week? No, you're actually fighting 2 weeks from now. Like, holy hell, man. But we got Alex Martinez is supposed to be taking on Anthony Pettis. No doubt that this is the fight of his career. I mean, Alex Martinez is one of the better Canadian fighters, certainly. He's 8-0, he's got an undefeated record. He was like a standout amateur, man. This guy was a beast. As an amateur, officially, his record was 15-4. He also represented Canada a couple times at those IMAF tournaments and really only did lose to the best guys. How many guys can say that they fought almost 20 times as an amateur? Like, not a whole lot, but Alex Martinez took the long road and developed a hell of a skill set. He's an excellent grappler. His wrestling is not elite. His striking is certainly not elite, but he's got good durability, good cardio, and he is a good grappler. He can catch a lot of guys in submissions. That's how he won his last fight, was not with the submission win. It's the threat of the submissions causes the judges to say, you know what, you're working off your back. That's what bails him out. As far as notable wins on the Canadian regional scene, none. He did sign with Brave, and again, he fought a fairly low level of competition there. And then he came over to PFL and takes on Loik Radzhabov in his debut. I did not think he won that fight. I thought he got taken down in every single round. He got controlled for the majority of it. I thought that Loik won 2 of the 3 rounds at the very least. It's a split decision that goes Alex Martinez's way. I disagreed with it. Now, I'm not an Anthony Pettis guy. Never have been, never will be. But I was picking Anthony Pettis over Alex Martinez, and that it wasn't a great showing for Martinez, man. Listen, Loik was the one that initiated all of the clinches, all of the takedowns. It was that Martinez is throwing up Kimuras, and he's throwing up some arm bars, and he's throwing up his legs. The fight would get standing. Not really anything meaningful would happen standing, and then Loik would just grab a hold of him and toss him back to the ground. Like, I don't know. I don't know how he lost that fight, but the judges were obviously going with that ability to attack off your back. Now, against Anthony Pettis is a better wrestler than him. His grappling, in my opinion, would probably be close to par at the very least, and his striking is a massive advantage for Anthony Pettis. So whereas Anthony Pettis usually takes on these guys that back him up, stay in his face, outwork him, make him reconsider this, cause some physical pain. Like, Martinez was probably going to look to grapple him, and it would have to be Pettis that chose to take the fight to the floor. So I didn't think he was going to win that fight. And then Pettis pulls out. I mean, literally gets booked for like a card 2 weeks from now. So again, it's just they pulled a switcheroo, and he draws Nathan Schultz, who's like another $2 million man. Another guy who was a PFL standout, did lose his last fight to Marcin, okay? But prior to that, him and Lance Palmer, they kind of ran this show over here. They're cashing big money checks, and they're kind of the 2 of the organization's standouts. So they've done him no favor here. He's going from Anthony Pettis to Nathan Schultz. It's not a short notice opportunity for Schultz. It's not a short notice replacement for Martinez. I think both guys, in terms of camp, you're in camp. It's a season. You're fighting for $1 million. There's no, I'll wait until they announce my next fight. You're going to fight. You're in shape. You're ready to go. So Schultz going to be perfectly okay here. And here's the big advantage. Schultz a better striker than him. Schultz got, I think, better pace than him. He's got certainly way better experience than him. He's fought in the bigger name guys. He's fought in the deeper rounds. But it's his judo black belt, I think, is going to be key, is that he is difficult to take down. We have seen him get taken down. But even when Nathan Schultz does get taken off his feet, he's very quick to pop back up. Like, his get-up game is advanced. He's a guy that stays out of harm's way very largely. And that Marcin Held fight is a total head-scratcher, because Marcin Held, BJJ black belt, excellent grappler, excellent leg lock specialist, and he boxed Schultz up. He just kept the fight standing the whole time and legitimately boxed him up. It was puzzling, because I thought Schultz was a little bit crisper with his hands and had decent boxing technique, but in hindsight, especially watching it back, he just takes too long to get going. He allows Held to dictate the action for the first 2 rounds, and then the third, he starts to come on a little bit. It's just a little bit of too little too late. So in this fight with Martinez needs to get this fight to the ground. That's where he's effective. He's not going to be able to take Schultz down, and even if he did, Schultz getting back up. Schultz will dictate where this fight goes. He's going to be okay on Martinez if he chooses to play top game. And if he chooses to just keep it standing, he should box him up. He should be able to get the victory that way as well. So it's disappointing for Lance Palmer and Nathan Schultz to lose those first rounds, but PFL knows what they're doing, and they're going to try to get these guys back on track. He's a 325 favorite. Granted, he's supposed to win, but I do agree with that assessment. When you look at Clarissa Shields at 270, it's like, she could run into some troubles. When you look at Brendan Luterbach at 325, it's like, as mentioned with Tyler Diamond, like, he's not exactly a walkover. When you look at Lance Palmer's minus 1,000, that one makes a lot of sense to me. There's just a lot of these lines where you can make a solid argument for the other side. I'm not sure what my argument is for Alex Martinez, other than he needs to end up on top control, and I don't know how he ends up on top. Could he submit Nathan Schultz off his back? Anything's possible. But, no, I wouldn't bet on that. So we've got Schultz 325. I really want to say Schultz our top ticket guy. He's somebody that we're going to parlay on that number one piece. He's going to be one of our locks of the night. The one thing to consider, and I didn't do it thankfully because I didn't bet the first card of the year, but I probably would have had Schultz, if not on the top ticket, one of the top tickets when he lost to Marcin Held. So he has blown and has a big favorite once already. But I think that was just like clear some ring rust. Had a whole year off because of the pandemic, right? Have a little ring rust, get back in it. He's at ATT. He's sharp. Going back to the drawing board. Great conditioning. Still a young guy. Skills all over. Schultz should be able to pull this one off. So I'm going to go with him. And again, at minus 325, I'm not really telling you anything you probably don't know. I just feel more comfortable with him than I do some of those other big favorites. Moving down, we got Marcin Held taking Obe Mercier. I know a lot of people are calling Obe Mercier one of these live underdogs on the card. Who's the guy that's going to potentially go out there and play spoiler, and maybe it's Obe Mercier. It's just, I got some red flags with Obe Mercier. I'm not saying he can't win this fight. Certainly it's a matchup that they kind of match up pretty even, really. I mean, they're both BJJ black belts. They're both guys with good ground game. Obey Mercier, judo black belt, as well as wrestled for the Canadian national team. So he does have legitimate wrestling as well. Canadian, I don't know how legitimate it is, to be honest with you, but he does have a wrestling game is what I'm getting at. And we know that his jiu-jitsu is pretty solid. Training at a TriStar, great bodies to work with day in and day out. It's just he hasn't been around in a long time, He was on a roll at one point, beats Thibaut Gowdy, beats Drew Dober, who you're going to see in the UFC on Saturday, Anthony Rocco Martin, a split decision. That's a solid victory. Evan Dunham, the age veteran, and a knee to the body knockout. And now he's the Canadian gangster. Now he's got a fanny pack, and now he's building a little bit of a name for himself, and then the UFC just absolutely crushes him. They don't roll with it. They don't run with it. They don't say, hey, yeah, let's continue this Canadian gangster thing. Hey, we don't have a whole lot of Canadians on the roster, and this guy seems like he's starting to become a bit of a fan favorite. No. They're like, here's Alexander Hernandez. In hindsight, that was probably his most winnable fight of the run, but loses to Hernandez, loses to Gilbert Burns, of course, lose to Arn Tsukarian. They gave him no favors there, and then he's released, but that release is 2 years ago. So when you leave the UFC, you're 30 years old, you're in the prime of your career, but you're now in a 3-fight losing streak. To come back, 2 years later, I just don't, that's red flag number one, right? Red flag number two is that he was supposed to take on Jolton Luterbach, who we talked about previously in the show, at PFL 1. This is the first show of the season, right? So we're back. He signed up to fight in the tournament. This is round 1. This is a huge moment. And he pulls out of the Jolton Luterbach fight with an injury. That's why Rush Manfio stepped in and replaced him, right? And Rush Manfio still beat Luterbach. Another reason why we're fading Luterbach, by the way. But man, shit, I mean, for Obey Mercier, that was like 6 weeks ago. So it wasn't even 6 weeks ago. It's like, I don't know. You pulled out with an injury. What was the injury? So that's red flag number 2. He's been off for 2 years. He pulled out of a fight 5-6 weeks ago with an injury over a very winnable opponent for him. Like, those are all problems. But then we got to go back to the UFC if you want to tape study Obey Mercier, just because, his last fight is in the UFC, obviously. So that's where you got to start and end it. With Tsarukyan, it's like, I can't draw anything from that because he got taken down 10 times and, 2 times, but Tsarukyan is just a different kind of animal, Him taking you down is not something I would expect Marcin Held to necessarily do. Gilbert Burns is an animal, I mean, he'd be able to do stuff I wouldn't expect Marcin Held to do. It's the Alexander Hernandez fight that's most troubling to me, where Hernandez takes Obey Mercier down 4 times, and he also soundly outstrikes him. Hernandez is what we've seen is kind of mid-range at best, but Obey Mercier lands 19 significant strikes over the course of the 15 minutes. Against Burns, he actually only lands 40 over the course of the 15 minutes, and against Arman Tsarukyan, he lands 23. So volume's not there for him. Even though he's a okay striker, he's not making a fool out of himself. He's not a striker by nature. He's low output, and it's enough strikes to hopefully get a hold of you and take you to the ground. Thing is, against Gilbert Burns, he couldn't take him down. And against Tsarukyan, he couldn't take him. That I get. Against Marcin Held, it's like, maybe you can take him down, but his grappling is pretty top notch, man. I know it's black belt versus black belt, and I'm sure Obey Mercier is going to be able to survive. I mean, dude survived against Gilbert Burns. Obviously, his submission defense is on point. I just mean, it's not the greatest game plan in the world to be shooting takedowns repeatedly against Marcin Held. Marcin Held is not a good striker. You want to outstrike him. Only shit, he came out his last time out against Schultz and just put on like a career best performance. I never seen in my life Marcin Held strike like that. He was just reckless. Uppercut, right hand, left hand, 3-punch combination, 4-punch combination, countered everything, led the dance, danced the dance, did everything right. Shot a takedown or 2 along the way, but it was just like Marcin Held was a completely different version of himself. He's like a man possessed. I got thinking, you know what? He's only 29 years old, and he was realistically a guy that's always had all the skills. When he was at Bellator, he was supposed to be the next champion. Didn't quite work out. Comes to the UFC, fans out after a 1-3 run, but the skill's always been there. And so this is interesting enough to me, but he just beats Nathan Schultz. Cool. Before that, he beats Diego Brandao, Ultimate Fighter, Ultimate Fighter winner. The guy was a badass. Guy fought Conor McGregor. Guy was like high echelon. Guy fights in Russia still at an elite level. Musa Kamenev, my boy. Musa Kamenev, a guy I thought at one time would come to the UFC and make some serious raves. He has a bit of a submission defense issue, I believe. There's a reason why he never kind of achieved the potential I thought he'd have. But like, those are 3 solid wins. Marcin Held's tying some wins together. So like, when was the last time he lost a fight? Damir Hadzovic, right? It's 4 years ago. That's the last time he lost. Wins the first round, wins the second round, jumps headfirst into a knee for no reason. I give him a pass on that. I don't really, myself personally, rewatch the fight. Well, I'm not going to consider that a loss for him. So then we got the Joe Lozon fight, which Joe wins a split decision and then tells the commentary team right afterwards, I didn't lose that. I didn't win that fight. I didn't win that fight. I don't know what the judges were looking at. I didn't win that fight. So it's like Marcin held. When was the last time someone beat him clean? Like no one really beats him clean. And that's back in the day. That's 5 years ago. He's 24 years old at the time, UFC, and not quite realizing his potential. Then he beats Nasrat Haqparast and they cut him. Comes off a win, but his 4-fight deal's over and then gets released. Haqparast, Nasrat. Like, he is operating at an elite level. Even his jiu-jitsu matches, he's losing to what? Richie Martinez and PJ Bart. Okay. Some of the best guys in the world. He operates at a high level. So as far as the grappling goes, I honestly give Hell a slight advantage over Aubé Mercier. As far as the striking goes, it should be Aubé Mercier, but volume's going to be held. Just fought. Aubé Mercier pulled out with an injury and has been off for 2 years. He's 3 years older. If he's not the best version of him that's been so far, he's in trouble here. If he's got some ring rust and he needs a round to get going, he's in trouble here. I think Marcin Held just beats him to the punch. He gets on him quicker. He attacks right from the onset. Same thing he did his last time out. Let your hands go. Throw these 2, 3, 4 punch combinations. I don't know that Aubé Mercier is going to be able to continuously take him down. If he does take him down, Hell's going to roll for the leg lock. And what the leg lock does is one of two things. Either you can submit him with the leg lock, that'd be great. But more realistically, it creates a scramble. Once you create this scramble, Hell's going to get back up. And if Hell doesn't get back up, that scramble will create a situation where he's going to sweep, and then he's going to end up on top. But I see him getting the best out of Aubé Mercier. Again, I wouldn't say this is my most favorite play in the entire card, and Hell is only minus 135. The odds maker thinks it's pretty close. As I mentioned, a lot of people online are saying that they think Aubé Mercier is there for the upset, but I think Hell might have turned the corner, man. His MMA record right now has been really good. He's been on a run. I think he is starting to get into his own. He seemed a little bit like in the day he was green, was struggling to add certain elements to his game. But if that's not an issue now, I have no reason to believe it's an issue now. I think Hell could be a problem for a lot of people. And Aubé Mercier off a 2-year-long layoff could run into that. This is another one that's tough to get a read on. Akhmat Aliyev versus Loik Radzhabov. Akhmat Aliyev, listen, he's a terrorizer as well. He's another one of these guys that was champion on the Russian regional scene. 31 years old. Big power. They call him the Butcher for a reason. He hits you, he knocks you out. As far as, Russian regional scene, he's the Fight Nights champion. He does beat Efren Escudero from the UFC. He beats Diego Brandao from the UFC, we just talked about. But he also picks up, this Magomed Saigid Alibekov spinning wheel kick. Oh, boy. 11-0 prospect, mean-looking Russian prospect, legitimate Russian prospect, knocks him out clean. Carlos Silva, 11-1. Vanir Galiev, beast. Matej Truhan, Ivan George, another UFC veteran. And he's just cutting through these guys. Makes his PFL debut, that Carlos Silva fight, and then he draws Chris Wade. The Chris Wade fight, very interesting to me because this guy is now billed at this point as a murderous power puncher. We've seen him in Russia. He's a murderous power puncher. He's the Fight Nights global champion, and he's defeating sound, legitimate UFC veterans. Chris Wade is at that same level of a Diego Brandao. He's at the same level of an Efren Escudero. And Chris Wade can wrestle a little bit. Maybe that's the path here. But he didn't wrestle. Chris Wade just stood in front of him and outstruck him the whole way. The numbers for Aliyev, I think Aliyev lands 15 or 16 significant strikes over the course of 15 minutes. And Chris Wade's not known for his striking. He's not known certainly as a primary striker. He mixes in the wrestling. He's having so much success, he just keeps doing it. So at that point, I'm like, Aliyev's a fraud. Rebounds beating Rashid Magomedov, big win, and then loses to Nathan Schultz. The Schultz fight, he does get taken down in the first round. The second round, he starts to tire a little bit. When he does get taken down, Schultz able to lock up the arm triangle choke. Schultz the man, so you can't take too much away from him. But again, now it looks like, okay, that's what I thought Wade would do, is use the ground game. The ground game was still there, like we thought. Turns out, though, you can outstrike him, which Wade did. And he beats Mikhail Odesnov. That's his first round matchup. And Odesnov is a Belarusian striker, but the entire fight, he's just trying to take him down the entire time. He's not overly interested in striking. He wants to take him down. You can see that there's not a whole lot of physicality. And one thing about his shots is they're well-timed, but he never drives through him. And it's always one and done with the shot. There's no train wrestling. There's no keep on him. There's no break him down. There's no tire him out. It's one single shot, generally from a little too far out. Good timing on it again, but would shoot something low, get stuffed, and then Aliyev has his way. eventually has to settle for a decision victory. And this fight with Radzhabov, yeah, Loik Radzhabov is one-dimensional with the wrestling, man, but that's what you want. He just sticks to you like glue and just sticks on you and on you and on you. He beat Chris Wade. If you want to play MMA math, Chris Wade just kept the fight standing, didn't have to use his grappling, which would have been his advantage. But Loik's able to just when he does strike, it's haymakers. Chop you overhand right, big left hand into a clinch, pull you to the ground, pull you to the ground, pull you to the ground. Lose to Nathan Schultz. Common theme you're going to see with these guys is they all fight the same opponents, right? They all fight the same guys because it's a tournament, and PFL generally uses the same talent pool of guys for the most part. So, you see a lot of repetition. So again, loses to Schultz, but we all know Schultz is a badass. It's that fight with Martinez, which even though he loses, that was impressive enough, man. He just stuck to him the entire time and just kept chain wrestling. So with Aliev, if Aliev's getting taken down by Loik, he's going to have a problem. But, one's got to imagine that his takedown defense is good enough to stuff those shots, keep this thing standing, and there he would have the striking advantage. Last but not least is that I thought his output versus Chris Wade, Rashid Magomedov, and Nathan Schultz were all way too low. He's just not throwing enough. You could have big power, but if you're not throwing enough, it's going to be a problem. Then he takes 2-year-long layoff, same as most of the guys, because PFL didn't let them fight in 2020 due to the pandemic. But the fight with Mikhail Odensov, again, it is a walk in the park fight, but yeah, his output looked awesome. He landed over 100 significant strikes, backed him up the entire time. Cardio looked good. Takedown defense obviously looked good, although a bite against a limited guy. And Loik is going to present a lot more threat with the takedowns, but if Ali was able to stuff more of them than not, he should be able to keep it standing and chip away at him and, probably settle in for a decision victory of sorts. Shayma Morais versus Jesse Stern. This one's going to have a big red flag for Shayma Morais. He should win. He should walk in the park. This should be a relatively easy task for him, but I don't think there's any easy tasks for him anymore. I just don't think he can take a punch. He's 30 years old, so he's not over the hill, and he's not one of these guys that you would say has taken, a ton of damage. It's just the result of these most recent fights where durability seems to be an issue. Listen, man, at his best, this guy is a problem. He fights Marlon Morais deep in the third round World Series of Fighting. Regardless of that, he beats Robbie Peralta, UFC veteran, knocks him out. He beats Luis Palomino, right? Who is one of the most badass strikers I've ever seen in my entire life. Was a World Series of Fighting standout. Fought Justin Gaethje in a fight of the year twice, and is now the current bare knuckle boxing lightweight champ of the world. And by the way, ain't going nowhere. I'd like to see the man. I would like to meet the man who's going to go lift that crown off Luis Palomino. Good luck, pal. Huge win, right? Zabit Magomed-Sharipov has a loss. No big deal at all. Matt Sales, Dominic Cruz's one of his best friends, top training partners. Julio Arce, Golden Glove boxer, BJJ black belt, solid fighter out of New Jersey. This is all upper echelon. The losses: Sodi Gusev, top 15 guy. Andre Fili, top 15 guy. Brendan Lutein, who's one of the tournament favorites of PFL. The problem for me is that Andre Fili knocks him out. Because think about it, he's got good durability to this point. Zabit takes Zabit's best shots, eventually gets submitted in the third. Sodi Gusev, banger, takes his best shots. Your Marlon Morais fight, once upon a time, took his best shots. Beat Luis Palomino. Yeah, Palomino took his best shots. So when Andre Fili knocks you out, it's a bit of a cause for concern, but it's MMA, right? It happens, it's all good. And then your subsequent fight, released from the UFC, subsequent fight against another guy who's, not necessarily known as a power puncher, good striker, deadly striker, big volume guy. And it's a short little right hand from the clinch, and it just completely discombobulates him. So, against guys moving forward, punch resistance is going to be an issue. It's going to be something we have to talk about every time out. But he's supposed to take on Mavlik Kasubayev, and that striking probably would have been an issue for him. But Mavlik gets rebooked. Classic PFL matchmaking. He gets rebooked. He gets shuffled around, and now we get Jesse Stern, who's coming in here making his World Series or PFL. It's no longer World Series fighting. Making his PFL debut. And Stern's been around for a long time, but again, with Sharman Morais, it's like, well, how do we beat this guy? How do we take advantage of him? It's like, I don't think he can take a punch anymore. Well, ain't that some shit? Because Jesse Stern can't knock anybody out. He's effectively not knocked out anybody since his pro debut. Only knockout win he has. And it's a referee stoppage. And it's 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, he TKOs a guy. And since then, it's grapple. Jesse Stern is a grappler. His step-ups in competition, Georgi Kukashvili, right? He loses that one. He rebounds over a 0-1 opponent. Then he beats a 3-12 opponent. Then he beats Mike Easton. That's a huge win. Mike Easton was a UFC bantamweight at one time and was legit. He was actually a contender for some period. But then the end of his career, he kind of fell off a cliff rapidly. Beating him still, though, that's a feather in your cap. It's at bantamweight. It's for the local regional show title. Only 3 rounds, though, even though it was a title fight. Big win. At this point, his career is officially launched, right? It's 2017. He's like 25 years old. It's like, but he follows it up with a win over a 10-7 guy. Then he loses that same title he won over Terry Bartholomew, 4-1. Not elite level, definitely a setback. Then he moves up to 145, and like he's not that big at 45. His wins over Thomas Blair, 3-2. Loses to Scott Heckman. And then this is the real key here. So we know he's a grappler. He's not a great striker. He's not physically all that strong. His wrestling's not all that really good. Every time he's taken a step up in competition outside of Easton, who we want to split decision with, it hasn't been good. And Easton's a bantamweight, right? Now he's at a featherweight. But he fights this Hassan Abdullah, right? Who's 8-8, and he squeaks out a split decision win. The very next fight, he takes on Carlos Guerrera, who's 3-3. And again, he squeaks out a split decision win. He's operating at the bare minimum level. Then they give him a step up, and Pat Sabatini. Don't want to fuck with Pat Sabatini. He's a CFFC champ. He's Jersey strong. He's fighting in the UFC right now. He's a BJJ black belt. And Stern gets submitted in the second. He's not going to compete with those guys. He beats the 3-3 guys on a split decision. He beats the 8-8 guys on a split decision. He has one notable win over a guy who was on a 4-fight losing streak in the UFC to cap off his career. And it was a split decision. And it was 4 years ago. And it was a bantamweight. And that's the feather in his cap. And it just hasn't been good since then. So, again, it's a fight. Anything could always happen. But with Shaman Morais, I feel like you got to get in his face and you got to hurt him. And I don't think Stern's got any punching power. Stern's takedown game, I don't think it's going to be strong enough to take Morais down. And Morais should just be able to physically outmuscle him, keep this fight standing, and then batter him with his strikes. He's got a way better striking game. Even though he might be a little bit hesitant to let his hands go because of these knockout losses, he still has that advantage. I guess the only other thing that kind of makes me worried is Stern has never been knocked out. He's been submitted 3 times and he's lost a decision. So if his chin's not an issue and he can pull Shaman Morais into some deeper waters, then maybe he does end up on top of him at some point. Maybe his grappling is good enough. But what do you think if Shaman Morais would fight a 3-3 guy or an 8-8 guy on the Utah regional scene? What do you seriously think would happen? He'd murder the guy. Doesn't matter how shot he is, he would murder the guy. If he fought Bartholomew, you think he'd lose that fight? No, it would not happen. He's operating at an elite level. Now losing to Brendan Luterbach, oh man, looks chinny. Losing to Andre Fili, he shouldn't be getting knocked out by Fili. Fili and Luterbach are infinitely better than anything Stern has ever fought in his entire career. Mark my words. So it is apple and oranges in that regard. And it's a short notice replacement for both guys. So how do they get the beat on each other? I don't know. I would have to say Shaman Morais walks right through him, but again, like PFL does a good job of just that little bit of uncertainty. You don't want to go too big on it because there's going to be apple pie shares. We got to figure them out. Last but not least, we got Chris Wade versus Arman Ospanov. Arman Ospanov, I thought this guy was going to go far, man. I thought this guy was going to go really far. I started watching him back in the Kazakh regional scene when he beat JP Reese. That's 2014, right? JP Reese is a guy that wrestled collegiately. He's out of American Top Team, was a decent, albeit not great fighter. But Ospanov went out there and he took care of him, handled business pretty effortlessly, right? He beat this Alexei Polpudnikov, who's a beast, right? He beats Joe Elmore, another stateside, regional scene veteran guy. And then he was supposed to take on Razul Mirzaev. Razul Mirzaev was total badass. He was an undefeated Russian. He was 14-0. He was supposed to be the next big thing as well. And then he punched a guy outside of a bar, and the guy hit his head on the concrete once he got punched out, died. So Mirzaev did 2 years in prison, and then that did kind of slow him down. But when he got booked versus Ospanov, I was like, the winner of this fight is going to go to the UFC and make some big things. The fight gets canceled, and then Ospanov kind of fell off a little bit. He got caught by a choke by Thiago Silva, one of the many Thiago Silvas, but not the most famous one. He got a rematch versus Polpudnikov, a guy that he already previously beat, and he dropped a split decision. He fights him a third time, so now it's a trilogy match. He gets knocked out, dirty knockout too. And then he gets the Razul Mirzaev fight. And wouldn't you know it, he knocks Razul Mirzaev out. Now, watching that fight, Mirzaev does drop him early in the first round, but Mirzaev comes at him, ends up getting taken down. And once he gets taken down, Arman Ospanov's ground and pound is lethal. Like, my God, he just thrashes on him. And so he's definitely a live fighter against Chris Wade. I see the line currently is 105 Wade, 1 favorite. And if it was the case, then I would take that Ospanov. But as much as Armin is a deadly power puncher and big finishing ability, Chris Wade is, for my money, is one of the most life. I mean, he lost a decision to Radzhabov. He lost a decision to Schultz. Was a split. He lost to Schultz the first time. It was unanimous. He went the decision with Islam Makhachev. He went the distance with Rustam Khabilov. He went the distance with Ozzy Luterbach. And that's another thing, right? So Ozzy's a grappler, right? He's got a Russian name. He's actually an American guy. But regardless, it's like, strong grappler. Win over Christos Giago, strong grappler. Rustam Khabilov, strong grappler. Islam Makhachev, strong grappler. Nathan Schultz, grappler. Schultz again, grappler. Radzhabov last time out. Radzhabov, he's a pretty good grappler. So, like, that's the way to beat Chris Wade. You need to mix up the wrestling. You need to take him down. You need to not allow him, because otherwise he's a great generalist. He's good enough in the striking department that he's going to strike with you until he can make some of the takedowns. That always adds up points on the judges' scorecards. He looked like shit against Anthony Dizzy his last fight. That first round, he looked way off as far as I'm concerned. But then the second and the third round, he saw him figure it out, put it together. Always comes with great cardio because he's got such a great chin. He's always there at the end of the fight, and he's always coming at you. Striking's made a lot of improvements, and I think he's just kind of got that experience. The thing is, like most of these guys, they didn't get to fight in 2020 because they're under contract with PFL. PFL did not run a show. These guys all legally had to sit on the sidelines. So I'm almost thinking it's possible. And now that he's just fought 6 weeks ago, he should be in more of a rhythm and he should be ready to go. Armin Ospanov was not in the tournament. Armin Ospanov is another one of these guys, misses the first round of the tournament, and then somebody's gotten hurt along the way, so they've brought him in. Is he dangerous? Absolutely is dangerous. But keep in mind that he himself has not fought in, a little over a year now. So, yeah, is he going to be a little bit is he going to have a little bit of ring rust? I don't know. If he hits Wade, his path of victory is drop Wade, hurt Wade, take Wade down, put some ground and pound on him. But I think Wade's going to dictate the wrestling. As far as the striking goes, Ospanov's got the power, but Wade's got the slight speed, and Wade's one of these more volume guys. Like, as much as he loses a lot of decisions, he wins a lot of decisions too. And it's just like a point-based striking. The jab's good, the kicks are good, and he just slowly outworks you. You go back to his fight with Aliyev, who we just talked about earlier. It's like Aliyev is the murderous power puncher, but he never gets going against Chris Wade because Wade just keeps his distance and just keeps chipping away at him. So, I mean, as far as this is a dog or pass for me, and they're actually made Chris Wade the ever so slight underdog. So I think I'm going to take Chris Wade. So quick recap on this for PFL season. Regular season number for 2021. These names, man, so convoluted. But we're going to go Clarissa Shields. We're going to go Clay Collar. We're going to go Bubba Jenkins. We're going to go with Brandon Luterbach, Nathan Schultz, Marcin Held, Akhmat Aliyev, Shaman Morais, and Chris Wade. So now that I say it out loud, I bitched out. Did I take all the favorites? I'm sure I did. Whatever. It is what it is. Which underdog is going to shit in my... Actually, technically speaking, I did not take all the underdogs because I got Chris Wade. What's up? Hopefully we get most of the favorites winning and our one underdog, Chris Wade. All jokes aside, though, it's like, I do agree with the lines. I know a lot of people are saying, Mercier is their underdog that they like. I, for whatever reason, can't get out of my head that Tyler Diamond's got a shot. And for whatever reason, I can see Bobby Moffitt putting one up as well. But, outside of that, these shows are either big on the underdogs or big on the favorites. And that's actually, here's a great example of that. So PFL, right? Their first show of the season, I suppose, number one, has got like three of the biggest upsets we've seen, in any MMA organization this year. Like PFL 1 featured. I guess my internet must be slow today. Things are just loading a little slower than I would have liked. Okay. So right off the hop, you've got no, that ain't it. So that's 2019, my bad. Season 1. Fuck, the naming convention is such a joke. Okay, so on the very first one, Anthony Pettis loses as a 6-1 favorite. Nathan Schultz loses as a 5-1 favorite. Lance Palmer lost as like a 6-1 favorite. They're massive upsets right there. So now it's like, oh, dude, spam underdog bets. The very next show, Rory McDonald was the favorite. Ray Cooper was the favorite. Joey Zaffarino was the favorite. Sordy was the favorite. Carlos Jr. was the favorite. Cesar Ferrer was the favorite. Hamlet Nielsen was the favorite. And Sadibu versus Alexei Alexikin was a no contest. Alexikin was the favorite, was on his way to winning before a bum-ass IPO canceled the fight. So you went from 3 huge 4 to 5 to 1 favorite, losing Dog City to the very next card. Every single favorite hits. I kind of lean towards that in this spot as well. I think a lot of these favorites are going to hit. Again, I think we've outlined the underdogs that have the chance, and ultimately it's up to you. I will tweet out stuff obviously Thursday, so if you want to check back on Twitter or hit me up if you got any questions or concerns or comments, I'm always open to some constructive criticism. If you've got a better read on one of these guys, if you've seen something, if maybe I didn't mention something, you want to hit me up, hit your boy up, and by Thursday, we'll have the right order. We'll have the guys that we got the most confidence and the least confidence in, and we'll be able to fully analyze Wayne's to the max. And then, best of luck to everybody. So we got a Bellator on Friday. Going to hopefully have another preview for that, and then UFC Saturday. So hopefully, if all the stars align, this could be our lucky weekend. At the very least, it's going to be an entertaining weekend. And as always, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to join me today and kind of listen to the preview.